right now. And then just a couple of reminders for housekeeping. We are in an unusual time with our pandemic, and one of the things that the Red Cross is really looking for is to make sure that we complete our training for COVID. And so if you haven't watched your COVID training videos at this point, I'm going to highly encourage you to get that done and let your disaster workforce engagement person know. I'll put the information on what you need to do in the chat. So you can do that by the end of the meeting, just as a reminder for you to do on your own time. And then we're also really encouraging everyone, if you're able, if you'd be willing to get a sheltering gap. And we're really just trying to help everyone. We know that they've asked everyone on the DRMT team to get their sheltering gap this year. And we just ask that people consider doing the sheltering curriculum in EDGE, and that would help the division as a whole and your region as a whole too. So just a quick reminder about that. So tonight we're here for a 6409 Disaster Requisitions Confidence Builder. And Liz is going to take us on a drill really here to see, like, how does the 6409 work and what do you need to do in order to get what you want. So take it away, Liz.
Okay, I'm Liz Calco. I am the supply lead for the Cascades region, and I am the subject matter expert for the supply and procurement tool for the Pacific Division. I have been with the Red Cross for about 3.5 years now, and I do deploy. Usually when I deploy, it's in logistics, either in supply or procurement or facilities. Those are my activities of choice that I prefer to do. And I live in Gold Beach, Oregon, on the southern Oregon coast. My assistant, who will be monitoring the chat today, is Diane Meckers. Diane, are you on? Say hi to the folks.
Diane is on. Hello, everybody. I'm from Salem, Oregon.
All righty. Thank you. I am really happy to see all of you on this confidence builder today. It's very important to know how the 6409 works so that we can all get the materials and supplies that we need in a timely manner. So I'm really honored and happy to have you all here with us today. We'll review quickly the virtual environment. You all have this little toolbar at the bottom of your screens that if you move your mouse, it will show up. You can unmute your mic if we call on you to answer a question. We do ask, as we said, that you keep your video off. And the chat box is over here. And you can type in a message over here into the chat, and Diane will be answering those questions as we go through today. You can also use the emojis to give a thumbs up or share a thought or a surprise or whatever as we go through. So quickly, once again, the housekeeping items are you can use the chat at any time to ask questions. Please try to keep your questions pertinent to the materials that are at hand today. Keep your computer, microphone, and phone on mute. Keep your camera and video turned off throughout the presentation. Please allow the instructors to answer the questions that are put into the chat, because that's what we're here for. And we do expect everyone to participate throughout. The supply and procurement staff do not have a crystal ball to be able to try to figure out what people put on their 6409s or what they are trying to tell us, where it's supposed to go, who it's supposed to go to. We can only provide what we understand is needed by reading what is written on the requisition form. Oops. The Form 6409 is the key to obtaining the needed materials and services for a disaster operation. It's used to track all of the supply activity. It helps us respect the donor dollar, and we maintain transparency by doing that. We need all kinds of materials, services, equipment, and things for facilities throughout our day-to-day operations. Logistics supply is the gatekeeper for obtaining the services and goods that you need. We have expendable and non-expendable goods that we use. Expendable items are things like water, blankets, comfort kits, the things that are going to be used up on an operation. The non-expendable items are things that we're going to clean up and put back in our warehouses, into our shelter trailers. They'll go back to DST to be used again. They're equipment that we may have borrowed or has been loaned to us that we have to return to the people that provided it to us. Logistics does not determine if the items ordered on a 6409 are valid. That is the job of the person who's approving the 6409. However, I do have to say, since I'm in supply, if I get a 6409 that looks kind of wonky on something that somebody is wanting ordered, I may go back to the approver and ask for clarification on it. For instance, if somebody added one too many zeros onto something, and so it says they want 10,000 of something instead of 1,000, I may go to the approver and question that if I don't go to the requester and ask them for clarification on it. Supply receives the form 6409, and that's what initiates our getting the materials, services, supplies, equipment to you. The accuracy of the information on the 6409 is crucial when time is of the essence in getting the supplies. An incorrect form moving past your desk, the approver's desk, or my desk will only come back and cause us delays while we try to get clarification or the proper approvals to be able to move that request forward. We review the forms for clarity, completeness, make sure it's approved by an authorized signer. We do have to go back to the person who is the requester if we have any questions on that, to have them make the corrections. Now, we can do this on the phone or we can do it via email, but we do have to go back to the requester to get clarification and approval to change any of the items on there. So we get the 6409, we review it, make sure it's accurate, clear, complete, has the proper approvals. We process the request. We like to have like items grouped together. We decide how we're going to source it. We disperse it to the sourcing activity, which can be in-kind donations, the warehouse, procurement, or any of those sourcing activities that we use. We obtain and deliver the goods. We get the receipt and the Part B, which is what is signed when we deliver the services, materials, or whatever you have asked for. We complete the three-way match, and we close the supply activity by submitting the documents to the division or the region. Lots of times people think that we're being really picky on some of the things that we say that we have to have. But many times these items are audit items for us. So we're not trying to be difficult or hold anybody's stuff. We're just trying to make sure that all the paperwork is correct, and that's our job. Our job is to cross the T's and dot the I's. So if we come back to you, don't take offense. That's our job. Who can approve the 6409s? At the beginning of an operation, the job director will inform logistics supply who has the authority to approve the acquisition of material resources. There are some guidelines set up in ConOps as to what the structure should be and what their dollar amounts are. This is something that we have a list all the time. When we get those 6409s in, we compare that signature and name to what we have on our list. If you don't know who your approver is, you can call supply and we'll be happy to tell you who that person is. Very often it will be somebody who is an AD or a deputy assistant or something like that, the job director, but it usually is not the shelter manager, the site manager, the kitchen lead, or somebody like that. We very often get in 6409s that a shelter manager has signed, and then we just have to go back to the people and say, well, no, you need to take this to the AD of operations because that is the person who's in charge of your area. So make sure that you're checking to see who the signers are. And be aware that that can change on a daily basis because, as we know, the Red Cross has a rolling workforce. So the person that was there yesterday who may have been authorized to sign may have gone home. And when that happens, we have to get a whole new signing authority form signed so that we know who all the proper ones are. So if you are in question as to who can sign it, please call supply. We'll be happy to tell you who it is, and that way we can all get things moving in a much faster manner. When we say acquisition of materials or services or equipment, we don't necessarily mean purchasing because it could be an in-kind donation. It could come from the Red Cross warehouse. It could be a loan, a donation, etc. But it all has value. These are all things that if we didn't get these as an in-kind donation or as a loan, we would have to pay for. So the value of those in-kind donations or loans still get reported on the 5266 as a cost of the job. Mass care procurement cards. These are cards that are given to various people at the beginning of a job or when they deploy to be able to purchase things that are, we'll say, emergency items in the middle of the night if you're working in the shelter and you have run out of diapers and you have somebody who has a small child and they need diapers right now, then you would use the MCPC card to go and purchase those. The mass care procurement card is not meant to circumvent the supply activity. It is meant to only be used in the case of an emergency or at the very startup of a disaster operation before logistics, supply, and procurement gets in there so that you can start getting items that you need. So any of you that will be working with the mass care procurement cards, please be sure that you become familiar with the standards and procedures so that you know how to handle that. When you have that, you need to make sure you're keeping your receipts. There's an expense register that has to be filled out. And as you go to process off the job, you have to complete a 6409 for all of those purchases and have it approved. And then it gets turned in to the supply function. Please don't ask supply to make exceptions for you. We have a pile of 6409s that we're working on fulfilling for different people. And if you come in and you want us to move yours to the front because perhaps you were late in determining what you needed, you were late in being able to find somebody to authorize it or whatever, it makes it hard, very difficult for us to try to put your order in front of everybody else's. In addition to that, we may have already sent all of our procurement people out already to do their purchasing for specific groups of 6409s, and it may not be possible for us to just real fast move yours to the front of the pile. So please don't come to us and ask us to give you some special treatment. The 6409 must state exactly what supply or service is being requested, when it is needed, who is requesting it, and who has approved it. When it is needed, please do not put ASAP in there, which for us means as slow as possible. Be very specific in your description of items, especially for common items like Post-it notes. As you can see on the screen, all of these are Post-it notes, and they come in all different shapes and colors and sizes. If you just put down Post-it notes, we're probably just going to maybe get you the little 1 inch by 1 inch. I filled an order one time and I came back with them, and the person looked at me and said, well, I wanted the fluorescent multicolored ones because I use them on my whiteboard to be able to mark different things. Well, you have to tell us that. You have to be very specific as to sizes, shapes, colors, all of that stuff when you're filling out your 6409. It's very important because, like I said, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell what it is that you're wanting if it's not real clear for us. Guidelines for filling out the 6409. Please try to request similar items on different 6409s. If you have food and office supplies, separate those out onto two different 6409s for us, because we're going to be shopping for those most likely in 2 different places, because where we go to buy the groceries probably won't have the staplers or clipboards or other things that you might want as office supplies. Another example is, if you're ordering food and then you want coffee cups and cold cups and clamshells and that kind of thing, we're most likely not going to be getting those kind of paper supplies at the grocery store where we go to get the food. So there again, it's helpful if those are separated out for us. We have to process our 6409s based on a vendor. We can only input them into our supply procurement tracker for each vendor. So when we get a 6409 that we've had to shop for and we've had to go to 3-4 different vendors for it, we end up having to take that 6409 and make copies of it, highlight the items that go to this vendor, highlight the items that go to that vendor, and it just causes, there again, more time delay, and it increases the rate of error when we have to start doing that kind of thing. We received the 6409s for all goods and services except vehicles, and the 6409s for that go to transportation. Logistics DST gets all of the 6409s for any of the DST items, the laptops, the cell phones, copiers, printers, all that kind of stuff goes directly to DST. Occasionally, at the startup of an operation, purchases can be made by instruction leadership, and the 6409 follows. It's really that you do that 6409 as soon as possible, and if you don't have the form available, at least try to make sure that you're writing down all the information on a notepad or something, so that as soon as you have that 6409 available, you can fill it out and get the approvals and everything. Because if you wait too long, lots of times your memory fades and you can't remember who asked for what, when, or where. So if you're at the beginning of the operation, get that 6409 done as soon as you possibly can for us. Diane, are there any questions in the chat box right now?
Yes, there are. We've answered a couple of them, but there's some here that I think you might want to address, or if you haven't, if it isn't coming later. First of all, on the MCPC cards, do you have to have a 6409 for each receipt?
No, you don't. You can list all of the items that you have on one 6409 and have it approved, because you have your expense register to back up what you're putting on the front of that, as well as your receipts. And in supply, we do not enter those 6409s into our system. So I hope that answered the question on that.
Okay. If not, somebody can re-ask the question here. The next one is, are you going to go through the three-way match?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And then how do you, how does a person get questions resolved about quantities and just clarifying how to describe what they want in a 6409? Are you going to go through that?
Yes, I will.
Okay, then we're good.
Okay. So moving on right now, there are three parts to the 6409 form. There's the request, which we most often refer to as the A copy, just because that's the easiest since we have a B and a C. So we have the request, which is the first page, which is filled out by the requester that gives all the information and they get it approved. We have the B copy, which is signed by the person who receives the goods or services to make sure that they have received everything. So when they are receiving the goods, they need to go down that list and make sure that everything on that list is received that they're signing for. If it's not, then they need to make sure that they're putting some notes in the area that has an area for discrepancies, and we'll go through that in more detail. There's also the C copy, which is the bill of lading, which most of you won't have anything to do with. It's usually used when we have supplies brought in by tractor trailer and that are being shipped to us in that matter. And that's something that normally comes just directly to the supply function. So that's not usually something that most of you will have to even think about. So here is a copy of the 6409. And we'll start going through this in more detail. The top of the form, you put in the DR number, the DR name, and the date. If you're going to be doing these electronically, what I usually like to do is set myself up a template so that I already have the DR number and the DR name in there, and maybe even my name and title and phone. So those are things that I don't have to put in for every single 6409 that I'm doing. And then you can save that template. And when you submit the 6409, you just do a save as. So you fill in the DR number, DR name, date. You do not put anything where it says requisition number. That is something that we do in supply. Your name is the requester. And lots of times that can just be like MC/FF, mass care feeding, LOG SUP, It doesn't necessarily have to be what your formal title is. And your phone number is very important, because if we have to try to reach back to you to get clarification on this, we have to be able to get in touch with you. The delivery information is also very, very important. The point of contact name would be the person that we should be seeing to deliver your supplies to. And that may not be you. It could be somebody else at the shelter who's going to be there, and you're not going to be. If you have something that you're going to order to go to headquarters, for instance, be very specific. Most of the headquarters I have walked into are very, very large buildings that have hordes of desks, just a sea of desks, or it's a very large building that has a lot of separate different offices for the various different activities. So if you just put down headquarters, we walk in, we don't know who we're supposed to be delivering these supplies to. So if it's going to headquarters, you might put in there HQ, DHS, Disaster Health Services, DMS, Transportation. Give us a good hint of exactly where this stuff is supposed to go to. If it's going to a shelter, it's important, especially if we have more than one shelter, that you're putting in the shelter name that it's supposed to go to, the address, a phone number for the point of contact, so that if we get there to deliver the items and that person isn't there, we can call them and ask how they want us to leave these materials. An email if possible, the city, the state. The zip code probably isn't very important. In the state, well, the state could be. The last DR that I was on was Mississippi and Alabama. It's one region combined in the two states. And we were working pretty close to the state lines. So some of the things went to Alabama, some of the things went to Mississippi. So in that case, having the state in there was very important. The person who's requesting it may not always be the same person that it's going to be delivered to. So therein lies, again, be very, very careful and explain to us exactly who that goes to. The person that's requesting the items cannot be the approver. This is where you'll enter the items that you're requesting. Most often, you can ignore the stock number thing. That is a column that we use if we're ordering things from possibly the Disaster Field Service Center, or if we're ordering things through Coupa, which is the new web-based system that replaces Request. The quantity of items goes here, the unit of measure, which is each pack, case, or box, and the total number of each. Your description, the date needed, and any special instructions that you might have for this. Now in the quantity, the best rule of thumb is to just tell us totally how many you want. For instance, let me use cases of water as an example. You may think that you want 4 cases of water, and you're thinking it's 24 per case. So that would be like a total of, I think, 96 or something like that. I could be wrong. We might not be going to a store that has the cases that are 24 count. We might be going to Costco that has the cases that are 48 case units. So it's much easier for us if you just tell us how many bottles of water you want and put each, and it would be the same. So your quantity, your total quantity, we will always get you at least the amount that you've ordered. If it's a case, If it's a matter of where we're getting case lots, then you may well get more just because of the configuration of the cases. But we will always get you at least the amount that you order, unless for some reason where we're shopping happens to be out of the items. After, if we can only get 3 cases and they have run out, then that is what we will get for you now, and then we will do our best to fulfill the rest of that order as we go. As I said before, the description is extremely important. On those bottles of water, it's helpful if you would tell us maybe what size you want. Sometimes people working in the kitchen might want they might want gallons of water, or they might even want the 5-gallon container of water, depending on if they're using it for cooking a lot. Some cases might want those little stubbies of water. So that's very important. Another example is if you're ordering cups. So you say, I want 1,000 cups. Well, okay. Do you want hot cups or do you want cold cups? Do you want 8-ounce cups, 16-ounce cups? What size cups do you want? Do you want them specifically for hot or specifically for cold? So as you can see, having all those little details is really important. So just kind of imagine yourself being in some place like cash and carry or a restaurant supply store, and you're going down that paper aisle, and just envision how many different kinds of cups are on those shelves that you're looking at. So it's very important that we have the accurate information. Otherwise, it just holds up the order for you, especially if we're not able to stop right then and get on the phone and call you and get clarification. The date needed, as I said, do not use ASAP. Plan ahead. We need to have usually a minimum of 24-hour notice to be able to get your supplies to you. The folks that we have out doing procurement often work in shifts and will work around the clock. We have some that will do procurement during the day, and then we have some that will be out after 5, 6 o'clock at night going to the stores to get things so that they can have them to you by first thing in the morning. So make sure that you're planning ahead and giving us enough time to be able to get your services, materials, goods to you. Down in special instructions, you can put only if in kind. And what that means is, let me use a television as an example. Say we have a staff shelter, and gee, it would be nice if we could have a 65-inch television in there for everybody to watch. But in respecting the donor dollar, is it really pertinent of us to go out and buy a 65-inch television so the staff can watch TV? Not really. So a special instruction might be only if in kind. So if we're able to source that TV through a rental agency or some company that would be willing to loan it to us, then we could get it. So when you're asking for something like that that isn't really essential, but it would be nice if you could have it, you might say only if in kind, and that's what that means there. Other things that you would put in the special instructions could be special hours for delivery, directions to the location, especially if road signs are gone or if the site is difficult to find. As I said, for most people, the unit of measure using each is the safest, but spend some time discussing that. Talk to your supply people. Each also gives us the flexibility and options for where and when we're going to acquire some of this stuff. The bottom of the form is where you get the approval, or I should say where you get the approval based on that list of authorized approvers. So the authorized approver, you would take it to them, or, and I will go over in a minute how to do these virtually, but you would take it to the approver and they would print their name, their title, they would sign it and put in their phone number. The accounting string is something you can put in, but it's optional. The accounting string can always be found in your IAP, your Incident Action Plan. You will not be putting in the procurement tool used because you don't know where we're going to get this. If you're handwriting this form, be very careful to make sure that it's legible for us. Always use pen. Make sure that your numbers are clear. If you make a mistake and put a 3 and it should be an 8, don't try to just write 8 over the 3, because then when we get it, we can look at it and go, oh, gee, is that supposed to be a 3 or is that supposed to be an 8? I'm not sure. So if you make a mistake on a number, just cross it out and write the correct number next to it. Makes it much easier for us when we're looking at these forms and trying to figure out how much we're supposed to get. The Part B of the form, if you're completing this online on your computer, the Part B will automatically autofill with everything that is on the A copy. This form, the Part B, provides us documentation for not having received specific items requested. Therein lies the part that says discrepancy. Anyone who is receiving items needs to make sure that they're going down that list of items and not only checking that the items are there, but the quantities are correct. And if the quantities are not correct, then they would mark out the quantity that's on the Part B and write in the correct quantity that they have received. We need to be aware of who will receive it when it's delivered. Therein lies putting the point of contact on the Part A. This will probably not be a manager or a supervisor, but rather someone who has that specific assignment of receiving items. This helps us, and it stops the I didn't get it. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Well, we don't have the form. So when we have that form, it helps everybody in knowing what was received, the proper quantities, the proper items. Make sure that if you're signing the Part B, that you're printing your name and it's legible for us, and that you're signing it, and the date and the time that you received those items. That way, too, if the person who requested the items calls us and wants to know if they've been delivered because they're not at that site, we can pull that form up and we can tell them, yes, those items were delivered to your point of contact on this date and this time, and there were no discrepancies. So this is the top portion of the Part B. Here again, you have the DR number, DR name, the date. At this point, it will probably have a requisition number on the top of it. The point of contact name, their phone, and if we have it, the email. These items here again, if it was done online, these will all self-populate from the A copy. If you're not doing it online, you need to put in all of the quantities, unit of measure, totals, and descriptions that are reflected on the A copy. This is part of our three-way match process, and it confirms receipt of all the items that were requested. The bottom portion of the Part B, here again, like I said, there's a place here for discrepancies. So if the items that were received, if the quantities, that could be listed here. if there was a discrepancy in the items that were delivered, that would be listed here. Say that you did ask for 1,000 cups and we brought hot cups and you wanted cold cups. Then you could tell us to take back the cold cups, and you would write here under discrepancies that we wanted the hot cups but received cold cups, and that those will be reordered. So anything that's a discrepancy on there, it's important that you put that in there, because there again, that's part of the way that we can tell people what items were delivered to them. And here again, print your name if you're the receiver, sign your name, give us the date and the time the time that we delivered it to you. Diane, are there any questions right now?
I think we have all of the questions answered.
Okay.
If I've missed any, please post it again. There is a question that just popped up here. What is a group?
A group would be, and we'll say an activity. So the group would be mass care. There again, if it was going to mass care feeding, it could be MC/FF. If it was going to mass care sheltering, it could be MC//SH. And that helps us know there again exactly where it was delivered to. So the group is pretty much the activity that received the items. Okay, we'll move on here. The virtual 6409 submission process. In our virtual environment, we are doing all of our 6409s online. So when the requester completes the 6409, they should email it to their approver. Their approver should then email it back to them, and then they should email it to supply. That gives us in supply, because we don't have any written signatures, but that gives us an email trail showing that the email of the requester is where it came from, and the email of the approver, their name is in there. So we have the requester's virtual signature in that manner, and we have the approver's virtual signature in that manner. And that's what we use for our signatures. But there again, the authorized signer has to be somebody who is on the authorized signing list. They also have to be somebody that has a dollar amount that is adequate for the items that you're ordering. If that's an issue, we in supply will probably end up going to the person who has the greater financial authority and get it signed off.
Okay, Liz, we have a number of questions here. Is this a good time?
Yes.
Okay, one question, can you return part of an order and keep the other part?
Yes, you can. If it naturally, but if it's a case of something, you can't just take out part of the case probably and say, I don't want the rest of it. But if it's a matter of you got 10 cases of cups and you only need 5 now, then you can keep the 5 and you can have us take back the other 5, and we can probably take those back to wherever we purchased them from. I know one time I was requested to go out and get 500 pillowcases. Well, by the time we were able to come up with all those pillowcases, scourging the entire town for those, Mass Care didn't need them anymore. So we ended up taking all of those back. So items that you don't need, yes, you can send them back to us, and we will return them.
And just as a word to the wise, I guess, when you're unpacking things, instead of opening everything up, try to only open cases and things like that as you need them for that very reason.
Yes, yes, because there again, too, at the end of the operation, if we have whole case lots that are left over, chances are we can return those and get a refund on them. Whereas if the case lot is opened, there's less of a chance that the vendor would be willing to take those back.
Okay, next question. If there are regions, do you need that too?
If there are regions, are you referring to possibly districts?
Yeah, I
If
think
there-
we need some clarification on that question maybe. So let's go to another one here real quick, and then maybe whoever asked that question can give us some additional information. Next question, what is the standard supply email address?
That can vary. If they set up a standard supply email address, it will most likely be in the IAP. And so you can get it from there. Very often I use my own personal email, not my personal email, but my Red Cross email address for people to contact me through, especially when you're working virtually. It almost has to be my own email address for that. So we can let you know. It would be in the IAP most likely as to how to contact us.
Yeah, I think it's hard to use an individual's email address sometime, because then when you leave the job and somebody else comes on, that you don't have a paper trail that way. But as the DRO is set up, that decision will be made as to what email address supply is going to be using.
Right, and it can depend on how big the DRO is. How many people you have working in supply would definitely be a factor. I mean, if you've got 4 people working in supply, like, we had quite a few people on the campfire, then yes, we had specific DRO email addresses set up for that. So it can vary depending on the DRO.
Okay, next question. Do you have suggestions for working on a virtual paperless DRO using MS Teams and SharePoint to obtain approval, submit, track, and that sort of thing, as opposed to emailing?
Oh.
The only issue, I will just say, the only issue with SharePoint is that other people can change some of your information. So that's one of the downsides of some ways that SharePoint is used, but
yeah, I haven't tried using the virtual office or some of those things yet on the virtual environment to be able to get approvals or that. So I'm not really too sure on how to answer that question. I know that the way that they're doing it through the email gives us the entire paper trail that we need. It gives us the 6409, the approvers, the requester, and all that. When you're on a job, they can tell you what method that they're using. And if they're using a different way through Teams or that, they'll make you aware of that.
okay, next question. Is there a form to track returned items?
There is not necessarily a form. When we return an item, what we do is we create a 6409 that has the item that we're returning, and we have it in brackets so that we know it's being returned. And then when we return it, our receipt gets attached to that. Everything is done the same way. Our credit receipt is attached to that, and it's put in to our tracking system as a return. So in that matter, yes, we can track those returned items.
Okay. Question, well, let's see here, about more of a comment, but I think it's worth emphasizing. It says, it makes sense to discuss the 6409 with shelter manager before submitting to avoid duplications, such as special cots. The thing about it is, remember that somebody has to approve these 6409s. Not everybody can order things like cots. So whoever the approver is kind of the person that's going to preclude duplication.
Right. But
Okay.
if you are filling one out, it doesn't hurt to run it by your shelter manager or something like that, because they might know that some of those items have already been ordered and they're on their way.
Yep.
So in that aspect, yes, run it by your shelter manager definitely before you are placing an order, because they would need to know that, even though they're not the person who's going to sign off on it. They're a person that definitely needs to know what you're ordering.
The next question, when identifying the group activity, should you include the district?
No, you don't need to include the district. The district, in the case of where it's being delivered, that would be laid out on your A copy for your point of contact. You know, you would put in, especially in the case of like shelters, you know, such and such a shelter in District 1, or, you know, the campground shelter in District 3. It doesn't hurt. More information is always better than less information. Let me put it that way too.
Okay, well, there's one other question I'm going to look at here, but just a comment with virtual workplace, the bandwidth and personal Wi-Fi vary a lot. I think that's something we all probably live with. Depending on the original source of the returned item, sourced from a warehouse, the warehouse has a log form used for that purpose that's reconciled daily. That's just a piece of information. So we've only got a few minutes left. So Liz, do you want to proceed?
I will proceed. Okay, here is a disaster requisition form that is filled out, and I'm just going to note some of the items on here that are probably in error. DR numbers aren't usually in this format, 1, 2, 3. You need to have the full DR number in there. Michael Morris, there needs to be a signature there if it's in person. The point of contact, the DR HQ, like I stated before, we need more information than just DRHQ. The activity that it should go to, the town that it's in, is information that needs to be in there. Here again, we've got 10 packets for a total of 50 sticky notes. As I said, the sticky notes come in all different shapes and sizes. 200 boxes for a total of 200. Well, that doesn't compute out, because a box will usually have more than one in it. So the quantities don't match up right. And with the pens, do they want black pens, blue pens, red pens? You know, it helps to know that information. The notepads, what size notepads do they want? Do they want the spiral down bound notebooks? Trash cans. Do they want the little trash cans that fit under your desk? Do they want the big garbage cans that would go outside the kitchens for people's trash? Here again, they've got ASAP in there, and we need to have a firm date. Diapers come in all different sizes, from The snacks, 500 each snacks. Let me know what kind of snacks you want, because my favorite is seaweed chips. So if you're sending me out to get this stuff, you could end up with 500 packets of seaweed chips, and see how happy that makes you. The water quantity of 100 packs for a total of 600. Here again, it's much easier if you just put in 600 each bottles of water, and there again, give us an idea of what size water that you might want. When you're dropping off a form in to supply, if you're dropping it off in person, don't hesitate to stand around for a minute and ask us to look at it and make sure that we can understand everything that you're requesting on that form. It's much easier to go through it and take care of it while you're standing there in front of us. Okay, obtaining goods and services is a process. Many hands touch the request. When we do the three-way match, it consists of the part A, the signed part B, well, they all have to be signed, but the part A, the part B, and the receipt. Those are our three pieces of information that create our three-way match, and it's an audit item for us. So when we start poking you and saying, we have to have this, we have to have it, that's why we have to have that stuff, because that's an audit item and we don't want to get our fingers slapped. The more you do this, the more efficient you'll become at it. So in summary, the requisition process is very specific, and it's the best way to ensure the delivery of the goods and services that you ordered and needed. There's a three-way match process that's designed to ensure accountability and enables tracking. Supply is responsible for everything except vehicles, which go to transportation, and cell phones, laptops, anything that's technology goes to DST directly. So our objective was to enhance your ability to be able to help clients in a timely manner by accurately requesting the services and supplies that you need to support the service delivery. Are there any other questions?
Well, let's see here. Actually, the only question, the last one was about if you need something immediately, is it best to put the date on it for the next day? And I've suggested that, yeah, the next day, but to call supply if they absolutely have to have things immediately and see what the possibilities are.
Right. Yeah. If you have something that's an absolute emergency, talk to your supply people. You know, they might be able to. They might have somebody who can run out and get it right away. If it's possible, we do our best to accommodate you, believe me. But sometimes, depending on the size of the operation, it's just not possible for us to drop everything and go get something for you right now. So I hope everybody is taking away a little bit more information in being able to complete the 6409s and get them into supply. I know that this has been something that we deal with a lot on DRs. People are always coming up, and when we tell them that we need a 6409, they look at us like a deer in the headlights. Like, what are you talking about? And I think it should be a mandatory class myself so that everyone knows how to fill these out and fill them out properly.
We do have one more question.
Okay.
So is the 6409 called the Greenie?
Many, many, many years ago, way before my time, it was called a Greenie. Now it's just called a 6409. I believe it was called a greenie because the forms were green at that time, but now they're just regular white computer paper.
I can say, you know, I've obviously, this is going to date me obviously, but the forms used to be the carbonized forms, that there was a green and a yellow and a pink and all that sort of thing. And so that's where it got, because one of the colors was green, so it was called a greenie for many, many years. So, you know, if people are still calling it that, they've been around for a while.
Right. I know a lot of you have to jump off and go into another meeting. My email address is at the beginning of the chat. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email, and I will be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.